Greetings folks and welcome to another 8/16/32-bit. I'm your host Rob, and as you've no doubt noticed from today's thumbnail, we're looking at Phantasy Star, Sega's RPG game from 1987. Now, Sega produced this game for its Master System and Sega Mark III after noting the increasing success of titles such as Dragon Quest and other similar titles for the rival Nintendo Entertainment System or Famicom in Japan. Now, this was a new venture for Sega, and they decided that it was worth putting together a pretty solid team to produce it. Now, as I said, in 1987 Sega developed this, and they took the designer Kotaro Hayashida to help put the game together. The coding was actually done by the legendary Yuji Naka. The art was produced by the equally legendary Reiko Kodama, and the music was composed by Tokuhiko Uwabo. Now, these were some pretty solid names, albeit they hadn't quite hit the heights that they would going forward, but still, this was a serious team of people put together to make a serious game with real, serious intent behind it. That's a lot of serious. Anyway, they were tasked with producing this game, and they were given resources which realistically hadn't been seen before. This was only the second game for the Master System Mark III to use a 4 megabit, that's 500 kilobyte cartridge with a battery backup for saving on. So this was a serious investment on Sega's behalf. Even when it came to the audio, there was a choice in Japan between the PSG sound that the actual hardware itself could produce, or an FM soundtrack option, which was available only to Japanese users who had the FM synthesis add-on. Now, with all this being said, what was the game actually about? Well, it has quite a simple plot really, as most JRPGs often do. You play Alice, and you're out to revenge the death of your brother Nero, who was killed at the hands of the troops of the brutal ruler of your home world, Parma, King Lassic. Now, King Lassic hadn't always been evil, and had grown more and more aggressive and violent over time, which resulted in effectively him becoming a brutal, evil dictator. Now, that's a fairly basic setup, but what do you actually do as Alice? Well, as Alice you go and you recruit 3 other characters to assist you, and you will travel all over Parma and even off-world to 2 other planets in your quest to defeat King Lassic and find out why he became so evil. Now, obviously, this is somewhat of a departure compared to similar games such as Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, where you had a lot of control over the characters that you created, whereas Phantasy Star essentially presents you with pre-created characters. Now, this could be seen as a negative by some, but to me, I think this is great. It means you're able to get into the game a lot quicker. You're not having to worry about character classes, weapons. Are they a magician? Your character is your character. Each character has a defined set of skills, and each of those defined sets of skills combines to help you defeat the game. It's really that simple. Now, the game itself is quite impressive for the time. Obviously, the Master System's colour palette is superior to that of the Nintendo NES. Sorry Nintendo fans, but that is the truth. So the game looks really, really good. It's very colourful, it's very vibrant. The town and the overworld or field have a strong, solid, easily identifiable look to them, with a sort of science fiction meets high fantasy aesthetic, which really does work very well. Now, the truly impressive part of this game though is when you go into the dungeons. Oh, the dungeons. The dungeons are rendered in a 3D style, and I don't mean like other similar computer RPGs of the time, like say Dungeon Master, where you would take a step forward and everything blockily update. These were what appeared to be smooth scrolling 3-dimensional dungeons where you could see the walls, floor and ceiling scrolling around you. And it does look insanely impressive, especially given the limitations of the Master System's hardware. And these are what truly makes Phantasy Star stand out from its peers. Now, combat in Phantasy Star is very much the typical JRPG turn-based system, although again, it looks a lot better than the way it was presented in games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. You get some beautifully rendered backgrounds and some lovely enemy sprites, although there was some cheating going on here apparently, where some of the sprite work was actually rendered using background tiles to help save on memory. But whatever, it looks good. You look at the enemy's face on, it's almost a 3-dimensional effect, and as I said, you get lovely colourful backgrounds behind them. Now, I've been brave with this and called it Sega's Final Fantasy killer, and for me it is. Now, this game and the original Final Fantasy actually did release at almost the same time. In Japan, Final Fantasy released 2 days prior to this on the 18th of December 1987, and Sega published this on the 20th of December. And this game hit the West just under a year later in November of 1988. Now, as I said, I'm calling this Sega's Final Fantasy killer, and to me it is. It's a much better game than the first Final Fantasy. In fact, it takes until you get into the 16-bit entries for my money for the Final Fantasy games to become as good as Phantasy Star. But, as we all know, Nintendo were dominant, and Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest went on and became huge mega franchises, buoyed up by the massive amounts of hardware that were being sold by Nintendo in Japan and the US. But Phantasy Star, despite never quite reaching those numbers, did become a big success for Sega. And there were 3 sequels on Sega's 16-bit Mega Drive and Genesis platform, Phantasy Stars 2, 3 and 4. And then eventually the franchise reappeared on the Dreamcast with Phantasy Star Online, a kinda sorta-ish sequel MMO, which is still alive to this day on platforms such as the PC. Now, these games have some content that keeps them in tone with the original, but realistically, outside of the original 4 games on the Master System and Mega Drive, they're not really that tightly linked, in my opinion. But yeah, Phantasy Star, it plays great, it sounds great, it looks great, it's just a damn great game. And I heartily recommend anybody who loves JRPGs, who hasn't played this before, to go and play it. You will enjoy it, and if you don't, well, that's fine too. Now, I really do want to hear your opinions on this. If you think Phantasy Star is a Final Fantasy killer, tell me down below. That's what it's there for, the comments. And hell, if you disagree with me, tell me down below, but please people, keep it civil, keep it polite. There's no need to be rude, there's no need to be throwing insults about, because at the end of the day, everything I say in this video about whether I think this is a better game or not than Final Fantasy is purely my opinion. That's all it is, opinion. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit that like button. If you've really enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And hey, who knows? If you really love it, maybe you'll want to join up with my YouTube membership or my Patreon. You can find the details for those down below in the description. You can also find my social media links down there if you want to follow me on social media such as BlueSky and Mastodon. But anyway, I've been Rob. This has been 81632-bit, and I will see you on the next video.